I've said for a really long time that The Flash is my favorite superhero, and I've been waiting for him to have a movie. He finally got one. I got to go watch it last night. So here's my honest opinion on The Flash. I love this cup. I want to start this video out with obviously prefacing that I am a massive fan of The Flash. I've read a lot of his comics. I've seen pretty much all of the animated shows and movies. I've also watched and stuck with the CW Flash from beginning to end, even when it got really, really bad kind of in the middle seasons. So you can really take me at my word here that I am being honest and unbiased as possible. I did not like the Flash movie at all. Before the video continues, I have to say, spoilers ahead. I want to start out with things that I like. So first of all, the suit looked incredible, and whenever he was actually tapping into the Speed Force, seeing the suit light up, much like this cup, it was pretty sick. Another thing that I really, really loved was the supporting characters around Barry Allen and the Flash was Michael Keaton's Batman, and then Sasha's Supergirl. I thought those were done really, really well, and I think that Michael Keaton's Batman just became one of my favorite Batman of all time, if he wasn't already. I love Michael Keaton's Batman, but this really elevated his character, and he kind of got to close the loop on something that Batman always struggles with, and that is he making a difference in his city in Gotham? And in this film, we see that Michael Keaton's Batman actually did make a difference, with Gotham becoming one of the most safe cities in the entire world. We also know that this movie really pulled from the Flashpoint storyline, where Barry goes back and saves his mom from dying. And in the comics, the Reverse Flash is the one that actually goes back in time, attempting to kill Barry. Barry saves himself, allowing his mother to be killed. In this, it's a bit different, but the overall theme is kind of still the same. The message is still the same. There are things in our past that have happened for a reason. They make us who we are. And if we could go back in time, we wouldn't be the same person we are today. And that really shows throughout this film. There's this overall theme of accepting your past, accepting who you are now, and moving on. Throughout the film, we get to see Barry struggle with that exact theme and that concept, while on the other end, we have the main villain, which is also struggling with that same concept, but in a very different way than our Barry Allen. If you go back to this video, I predicted that the younger Barry Allen would be the Dark Flash, and I was pretty correct. I was off on how and why he would become the Dark Flash, but I was correct on my assumption that he was the Dark Flash. It's pretty easy to see the younger Barry Allen slowly transitioning into the Dark Flash, which we see at the beginning of the movie and at the end of the movie. The Dark Flash looked incredible, and I think his overall story of how he got there was really interesting and done really well. It's actually pretty cool that the first time we see him is at the beginning of the film, when Barry's going back to the future after he has saved his mom already with the can of tomatoes. And then we don't see him again till way later, also when there's time traveling. That's pretty much the only time you see the Dark Flash, is when they're actually time traveling in the movie. I will say the one thing I really enjoyed about the time traveling was all of the different cameos that we got to see. While I do have some issues about it, I overall enjoyed all the different Superman and Batman cameos. We even got to see Jay Garrick, which was pretty cool. I also can't fail to mention the Nicolas Cage Superman, which was a huge meme and hilarious. I loved it. Now we can segue into the things that I did not like, which is pretty much everything else. So the main thing that really threw me off of this movie is that this version, Ezra's version of Barry Allen, was not any version of Barry Allen I've ever seen before, and it just didn't fit that character whatsoever. I think he was more of a younger and kind of immature and obnoxious version of like Peter Parker. I think the humor was very much a Spider-Man humor and not a Barry Allen humor. Barry Allen in the comics, he is always joking around with friends and family, but whenever it's time to be really serious, which you do get a little bit of that towards the end of the movie, whenever he's realizing that he can't save everyone and that he has to deal with some things that happened in the past. But through most of the movie, Barry is obnoxious and he's always making jokes and he wants recognition for saving people, which is just not Barry Allen in the comics. Barry always makes these really corny, almost like dad jokes whenever he's in company with loved ones, friends, and family. And I knew I wasn't going to like this movie the second I watched Barry Allen put a baby into a microwave to save it. That I just couldn't fathom Barry Allen actually putting a baby into a microwave to save the baby. It didn't make sense. Barry is easily fast enough to get the baby, take it down, save it, and go back up one by one, saving every individual child and the woman falling, plus the dog. He could have done that, but they didn't do that. They opted to do this really corny, awful joke of putting a baby inside of a microwave. I've got to say, putting a baby in a microwave, not exactly a Barry Allen move, but putting a baby in a microwave, Ezra Miller move, 100%. Under Zack Snyder, The Flash was like that, and he's even like that in the prequel comics to this movie. If you didn't know that, there's a 3-issue run of The Flash that's a prequel to this, where you see how he gets his ring and his suit and all of that good stuff. That also kind of brings me into something else that I didn't like, and that was the pacing of the movie. The pacing was really weird. The beginning was really slow, and it kind of seemed like they were building a very large and fleshed out story. But then the second act hits, and it just kind of all happens at once, and then the movie ends. And it was just kind of so fast, it was hard to keep up. With that pacing issue, also brings me back to the main villain of the movie, the Dark Flash, which just doesn't really have a final fight scene. I don't need a huge like CGI fight like we pretty much already had whenever they're fighting the Kryptonians, but some type of back and forth with the villain would have been nice. We get to see the Dark Flash at the beginning of the movie, and then he comes in at the end to kill Barry Allen, while the younger Barry sacrifices himself, eventually eliminating the Dark Flash, because that younger version eventually becomes the Dark Flash. So it does not make sense that they hype up this main villain, make him look so cool, give him a backstory, which is basically Savitar's backstory, by the way, and then he just dies that easily. Barry didn't have to do anything. He just stood there. I just think that the Dark Flash was underutilized in this movie, and the final fight scene was such an anticlimactic scene. All of this takes place in like this chronosphere, which is like their version of time traveling through the Speed Force, and I did not like it. I think it was the worst representation of time travel in the Speed Force that we've seen. It was really weird, and that also brings me into the CGI aspect, because the CGI was just trash. It was not good, and Andy Muschietti said that it was edited that way on purpose because you're seeing it from the Flash's point of view, but that doesn't really line up, to be honest. It kind of seems like a no answer, because sometimes the CGI was decent, and then other times it was just like PlayStation 1 graphics. It was really bad. I'm also not typically going to complain about the CGI unless it takes me out of the story. Yes, I love the theme of having to let go and accept who you are, that those events in the past made you who you are. But whenever the CGI is so bad, it pulls me away from that theme and that story and gets me to stop thinking about it. I'm going to complain about it. It just wasn't good. The time travel aspect and the Speed Force in this movie wasn't the only thing that I didn't like about Barry's powers. I also really didn't like that they put such a focus on him having enough calories to have speed. It made it almost seem like calories were the source of his power, which is just not true. It is true that Barry Allen has to eat a lot because of his extremely and extraordinarily fast metabolism, but he literally skips over saving a baby at the beginning of the movie to eat snacks out of a vending machine, and you can see on his watch where it goes from low power to maximum power after eating snacks out of a vending machine. That blew my mind. It didn't make sense, and honestly, I hated it. I also have to mention the fact that there were more actual Batman villains and Superman villains in this movie than there were Flash villains. There wasn't a single original Flash villain. The Dark Flash was the Flash villain, who's basically a ripoff of Savitar, to be honest. So that was strange for it to be a Flash movie. My biggest worry about this film is that this is going to be a lot of people's first like introduction to the character, especially on the big screen. Not everybody watches the CW shows. Not everybody reads the comics. Not everybody watches the animated series. So this is kind of their first introduction to the character of the Flash. And I just think they ruined it. There was also an interview right before the movie came out where they said that they just couldn't fit in Grant Gustin. That blows my mind because there's literally a scene or some like small portion of the entire film that has dedicated to cameos. This is where you see Nicolas Cage and all these different Superman and Batman, and you get to see Jay Garrick. They fit all of that in. They fit Nicolas Cage in as Superman for the memes, but they couldn't fit in Grant Gustin, the guy who's been playing the Flash for 10 years and kind of put the Flash on the map for a lot of people. A lot of people grew up with Grant Gustin as the Flash. He was their first introduction to this character, and they couldn't fit him in. That doesn't make sense. Speaking of things that don't make sense, what in the world was that post-credit scene? Don't get me wrong, I thought it was hilarious. I think it's always funny whenever Aquaman is in these movies and he makes cameos with them. And this one in particular was really funny. But they literally could have done anything. We already know Barry ended up in a different universe than the original one because George Clooney's Batman, for whatever reason, they just threw that in there out of nowhere. But they could have done anything with this post-credit scene. Literally anything. This movie's about time travel, different universes, the multiverse in general. What in the world is going on over at DC right now? Because that post-credit scene should have set up the new DC universe. If we could have seen like the old DC universe and all these other universes kind of exploding and being wiped from existence to set up the new DC universe, that would have made too much sense, I guess. I'm not even saying that's what they had to do. Just something to set up the new DC universe would have made so much more sense. To be honest, the more I think about this movie, the more I don't like it. And I really wanted to like it because this is the Flash's first movie, and the Flash is my favorite superhero of all time. But when I tell you that I walked out of that movie theater heavily considering that the Flash may not be my favorite superhero anymore, that really hits hard with me because I do love the Flash so much. I might have to switch over to Superman if James Gunn truly believes that version of the Flash was a great version of Barry Allen. I'm gonna have to switch to Superman because that was just not it. What I do believe actually happened is that even with the CGI and everything, they spent way too much money on this movie, and they just had to release it because they have to recover some of that loss. It can't be like the Batgirl movie, and they just cancel it because they spent like $300 million on this movie. And right now, honestly, it's tracking to not do well whatsoever. I think that's also where some of the CGI problems come in, is that they didn't want to spend any more money on the movie than they already had. So the CGI that's just what we got. And they're trying to recover a little bit of money so they can actually restart and build their new DC universe. That's my hope anyways. Well, I think that's going to be it for this video. Honestly, I could go on and on about how much I don't like this movie. And if you disagree, please let me know why in the comments. To be fair though, from social media right now, it seems like the only people that really like it are the people that want the Snyderverse restored or sold to Netflix, whatever. The Snyder fans seem to be out full force supporting this movie, which is great, and I'm happy they like it, but it's just not for me. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll see you next time. Peace. Oh, make sure you subscribe.